My sister tried to adopt my biological daughter without telling me, so I used the darkest secret from her past to destroy her adoption case. My family calls me a monster, but she was stealing my child. I was 19 years old when I took the pregnancy test in the bathroom of my college dorm. 3 tests, actually, because the first 2 had to be wrong. They weren't. The father was a guy named Tyler from my economics class. We'd hooked up exactly once after a party where I'd had too much cheap vodka and even cheaper judgment. When I told him I was pregnant, he literally laughed, said, "That's not my problem," and transferred to a different section of the class. I never spoke to him again. I thought about my options for weeks. Abortion felt wrong for me, though I don't judge anyone who makes that choice. Keeping the baby felt impossible. I was a sophomore with $17 in my checking account and student loans I'd be paying off until I was 40. My parents had already made it clear they couldn't help financially, they were barely keeping their own heads above water. Adoption was the only path that made sense. I chose a closed adoption through an agency in Portland. Closed meant no contact after birth. The adoptive parents wouldn't know my identity. I wouldn't know theirs. Clean break. Fresh start for everyone, except I negotiated one thing, a clause in the adoption agreement that allowed me to receive update letters twice a year. Photos, basic information about how the child was doing. Not enough to interfere, but enough to know she was okay. Her name is Emma. I got to name her, even though I wouldn't be the one raising her. Emma Claire, after my grandmother who'd passed away the year before. The only person in my family who'd never made me feel like I was disappointing everyone just by existing. I held Emma for 2 hours after she was born. The nurses kept asking if I was sure about the adoption. I wasn't sure about anything, except that I loved her too much to give her the life I could provide at 19. Her adoptive parents were Michael and Sarah Chen. They were in their late 30s, had been trying to have children for a decade. The agency showed me their profile. Photos of their home in Eugene, Oregon, a yellow house with a garden, 2 dogs, stable jobs, Michael as a civil engineer and Sarah as a librarian. They looked kind. That mattered more than anything else. I signed the papers on Emma's 3rd day of life. Then I went back to college and tried to pretend my heart hadn't been carved out of my chest. The first update letter came 6 months later. Emma was healthy, reaching all her milestones early. "She's curious about everything," Sarah wrote in careful handwriting. "Always watching, always learning, we feel so blessed." The photo showed Emma in a yellow dress, grinning toothlessly at the camera. I kept every letter, every photo. 15 years of twice-yearly updates documenting a life I'd given away. Emma learning to walk. Emma's first day of kindergarten. Emma at her first violin recital, bow poised over the strings, her face serious with concentration. Sarah wrote that Emma loved marine biology, that she wanted to be a marine veterinarian when she grew up. That she was kind to other kids, even the ones nobody liked. That she asked thoughtful questions and read books meant for kids 3 years older. I knew more about Emma than I had any right to know, and less than I needed. I'm 34 now. I work as a human resources director for a tech company in Seattle. I have a small apartment with a view of the water, a cat named Fitzgerald, and a life that looks stable from the outside. I date occasionally, nothing serious. I tell myself it's because I'm focused on my career, but the truth is harder than that. Part of my heart lives in Oregon with a girl who doesn't know I exist. I hadn't told Rachel about Emma. Not when it happened, not in the 15 years since. Rachel is my older sister by 3 years. We've never been close. She was always the pretty one, the charming one, the one who knew how to make people like her. I was the quiet one who read too much and never said the right thing at parties. When I got pregnant at 19, I knew Rachel would have opinions, judgments, helpful suggestions that would make me feel worse than I already did. So I told my parents, signed the papers, and moved on with my life. They agreed not to discuss it with anyone. As far as Rachel knew, I'd had a rough sophomore year and dropped out of the sorority. That was it. Last month, I ran into Casey Martinez at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. We'd been roommates freshman year before she transferred to study social work at Portland State. She recognized me first. "Natalie, oh my God, it's been years." We hugged, ordered overpriced lattes, caught up on the basics. She was working for Oregon Child Protective Services now, doing adoption home studies and case management. "It's intense work," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "but rewarding." "Actually, funny coincidence, I'm working on a case involving someone with your last name. Morrison, small world, right?" My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "Oh, that is a pretty common last name. This one's in Eugene, Rachel Morrison." She's trying to adopt a teenage girl whose mother passed away last year. Really sad situation. The coffee shop tilted. Rachel's adopting? Yeah, the girl's biological mom died of cancer. The dad's struggling to manage everything alone, so I guess it might not be your Rachel. Anyway, this Rachel has been helping them for months. The adoption should be finalized soon. After Casey left, I sat there trying to process. Rachel adopting a teenager in Eugene. It could be a coincidence, except my sister Rachel had moved to Eugene 2 years ago for work, and Eugene was where Emma lived. I pulled out my phone and searched Rachel's social media. Her Instagram was mostly private, but her profile picture showed her with someone. A teenage girl with dark hair, holding a violin case. My vision tunneled. That night I called Rachel. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright. Hey, stranger, what's up? I ran into Casey Martinez today. She mentioned you're adopting. Silence. Long enough that I could hear her breathing change. Who told you that? Casey works for CPS. She's handling your case. Rachel, who are you adopting? More silence. Then, defensive. It's not really your business, Natalie. It is if it's Emma Chen. I heard her sharp intake of breath. How long have you known? My voice was shaking. How long have you known Emma was my daughter? I don't have to explain myself to you. Yes, you do. You're trying to adopt my biological daughter without telling me. You owe me an explanation. You gave her up, Natalie. You signed away your rights. You don't get a say in her life anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. That doesn't mean I stopped caring about her. I've got updates twice a year for 15 years. How did you even find her? Rachel sighed. Emma's in some online marine biology groups I'm in. She posted photos from a violin recital last year. I recognized her. She looks exactly like you did at that age. I did some research, figured out who she was. And you've been, what, watching her online? Helping her. Her mother died, Natalie. She's 15 years old and grieving. Michael is overwhelmed. They needed support. So you decided to adopt her. Someone has to step up. I'm her mother. No, Rachel's voice went cold. You were her birth mother. Sarah was her mother, and now Sarah's dead and Emma needs someone. Michael thinks I'm a good fit. Emma likes me. The social worker is recommending approval. You should have told me. Why? So you could feel guilty? So you could try to insert yourself into her life after 15 years? You made your choice. Let me make mine. She hung up. Something about Rachel's urgency felt wrong. The way she'd positioned herself so carefully with Michael and Emma. The secrecy. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I hired a private investigator. His name was David Reyes, recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a messy divorce. David was thorough, discreet, and expensive. I need to know everything about my sister's financial situation, I told him. Why she might be suddenly desperate to adopt a teenager. David's report came back in 8 days. 47 pages of financial records, property searches, and court filings. Rachel was drowning. She'd quit her marketing job 6 months ago, claiming she wanted to focus on freelance consulting. She had 2 clients, neither paying enough to cover her expenses. $67,000 in credit card, debt across 9 cards. Her mortgage was 3 months behind. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. Her husband Tom had filed for legal separation 2 months ago. They were still living in the same house, but he'd made it clear he was done covering her expenses. And then there was the trust fund. Sarah Chen had come from old Portland money. When she died, she'd left Emma a trust fund worth $1.2 million. Accessible when Emma turned 18, which was in 3 years. If Rachel's adoption was approved, she'd become Emma's legal guardian with control over Emma's finances, including the trust, until Emma turned 21. I read that section 3 times, feeling sick, but I still needed more. I needed something that would actually matter in court, something beyond financial desperation that hundreds of adoptive parents might have. I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about Rachel, about our history, about the things I knew that nobody else did, and then I remembered. Rachel got pregnant when she was 21, junior year of college. She hid it from everyone except Mom and me, wore baggy clothes, claimed stress eating. She was 7 months along before Mom finally dragged her to a doctor. Rachel didn't want the baby, never wanted it, refused to discuss names or make plans. When Mom asked what she'd do after the birth, Rachel said, "I'll figure it out." She gave birth on a Tuesday in March. A boy, 7 pounds, healthy. Rachel held him once. Then she told the nurse she needed to use the bathroom. Instead, she left the hospital, drove to St. Mary's Hospital 20 miles away and walked into the emergency room carrying her newborn. Told the triage nurse she'd found him abandoned outside. Then she left before anyone could ask questions. The baby was placed in foster care, eventually adopted by a family in Bend. Mom and I swore we'd never tell anyone. Rachel had been young, scared, overwhelmed. We told ourselves it was a desperate decision made in crisis, but she'd abandoned her child, her own son, and now she wanted mine. I called Michael Chen. I'd never spoken to him before, the adoption had been closed, anonymous, but I found his information through public records. He answered cautiously. Hello, Mr. Chen, my name is Natalie Morrison. I'm Emma's biological mother. Long silence. I don't understand. The adoption was closed. I know, I've honored that for 15 years, but I need to talk to you about my sister Rachel. Rachel's been wonderful with us. I don't know what we would have done without her support after Sarah died. Has she mentioned me to you at all? She said you'd moved on with your life. That contacting you would only complicate Emma's situation. My hands tightened around the phone. That's not true. I think about Emma every day. I've never stopped caring about her. Rachel never told me she was trying to adopt Emma. I found out by accident. Michael was quiet. The adoption hearing is in 2 weeks. The social worker is recommending approval. Mr. Chen, has Rachel discussed Emma's trust fund with you? The trust Sarah left? Yes, we've talked about financial planning for Emma's college. Did she mention that as Emma's legal guardian, she'd have control over that money until Emma turns 21? That's standard for adoption cases involving minors with assets. Rachel explained it's for Emma's protection. Rachel is $67,000 in debt. Her house is in foreclosure. She quit her job 6 months ago. She needs money desperately. The line went very quiet. Are you suggesting, Rachel wouldn't? I'm suggesting you look into her financial situation before finalizing this adoption, but there's something else you need to know, something about Rachel's history. I told him everything, about Rachel's pregnancy at 21, about hiding it until 7 months, about giving birth and leaving the baby at a different hospital, claiming she'd found him abandoned. She never went back, I said, never tried to contact him. She abandoned her own son, and now she wants to adopt Emma, who has a trust fund worth over $1 million. Michael's breathing sounded strained. Can you prove this? Hospital records, birth certificate. The baby was born at Mercy General in Portland on March 14, 2004. Rachel Morrison is listed as the mother. If you need more, I can get DNA evidence. Why are you telling me this? Because Emma deserves better than someone who abandoned her own child, because I can't let Rachel do this. You could come forward yourself, try to reconnect with Emma. The suggestion made my chest ache. I signed closed adoption papers. Emma doesn't know who I am. Reaching out now would violate those terms and probably confuse or hurt her, but I can protect her. I can make sure the judge knows what Rachel's capable of. What do you need from me? Let me submit testimony to the family court. Let the judge decide if it's relevant. Emma will be at the hearing. She insisted on attending. This will be devastating for her. I know. But it's better than finding out 2 years from now that Rachel drained her trust fund. Michael was silent for a long moment. If what you're saying is true, yes, I'll support you. I hired a family law attorney named Jennifer Diaz who specialized in adoption cases. She listened to everything, took detailed notes, and then looked at me seriously. What you're planning will destroy your relationship with your sister, probably your whole family. I know. And you're willing to accept that? I'm willing to protect Emma. Jennifer drafted the sealed testimony over 5 days. We included hospital records from Rachel's pregnancy and delivery, birth certificate showing Rachel Morrison as the mother, medical notes from the psychiatric evaluation Rachel underwent after the abandonment. We obtained the original case file through legal channels, showing how the baby had been found and placed in foster care. Everything documented, everything provable. Jennifer filed it under seal with Judge Patricia Alvarez, who was handling Emma's case. The hearing was scheduled for March 23rd at 10 a.m. Rachel called me the night before, her voice sharp. Natalie, my lawyer, called. Someone filed sealed testimony in Emma's case. Was that you? I didn't answer. Tell me you didn't. Tell me you didn't do what I think you did. You should have been honest with me from the beginning. What did you tell them? What did you put in that filing? The truth. Her voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. What truth? You abandoned your own child, Rachel. You left him at a hospital. You don't get to adopt mine. That was 20 years ago. I was 21. I was terrified. And now you're $37,000 and $67,000 in debt, trying to get control of a trust fund worth over $1 million. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you tell Michael I wouldn't care? Because I knew you'd try to stop me. You've always been jealous of me, Natalie, always wanting what I have. This was my chance to do something good, to finally be a mother, and you're destroying it. You already had a chance to be a mother, you walked away. She hung up, blocked my number, blocked me on all social media. My mother called an hour later. Natalie Grace Morrison, what have you done? I protected Emma. You exposed your sister's deepest shame to strangers, to a court. How could you? How could she try to adopt my daughter without telling me? Your daughter, you gave her up. You signed papers saying she wasn't yours anymore. That doesn't mean I stopped loving her. That doesn't mean I stopped wanting what's best for her. And you think destroying Rachel is what's best. I think keeping Emma away from someone who abandoned her own baby is what's best. Someone who's drowning in debt and needs access to Emma's trust fund. My mother's voice broke. If you go through with this testimony, you're choosing that child over your family. I'm choosing to protect a 15-year-old girl. Then don't bother coming to Christmas, or Thanksgiving, or anything else. She hung up. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Light wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches that reminded me of church pews. Judge Alvarez sat behind an elevated desk, reading glasses perched on her nose. Michael sat in the front row with his lawyer. Rachel sat across the aisle with her attorney, a man in an expensive suit who kept adjusting his tie nervously. The social worker, Casey Martinez, sat near the judge's bench with a thick file folder. And Emma was there. I hadn't seen her in person since she was 3 days old. Now she was 15, tall, probably 5'7". Wearing jeans and a blue sweater with a small violin pin on the collar. She had my eyes, my nose. Her hair was darker than mine, pulled back in a ponytail. She looked between Rachel and Michael, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. Judge Alvarez cleared her throat. This hearing concerns the petition for adoption filed by Rachel Morrison regarding the minor child Emma Chen. I've reviewed the standard home study and recommendations from Ms. Martinez. However, sealed testimony was filed last week that requires discussion before I can make a final determination. Rachel's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we object to the introduction of sealed testimony. The defense hasn't been given adequate time to review or respond to allegations that appear to be. The testimony is relevant to the petitioner's fitness to adopt, Judge Alvarez interrupted. I'll summarize the contents, and Ms. Morrison may respond. The testimony comes from Ms. Natalie Morrison, the biological mother, who is standing to submit information relevant to the child's welfare. Rachel's face went pale. Emma's head turned toward her, confused. Judge Alvarez opened the file. Ms. Rachel Morrison, is it true that on March 14, 2004, you gave birth to a male infant at Mercy General Hospital in Portland, Oregon? The courtroom went completely silent. Rachel's lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but she shook her head. Your Honor, I don't see how events from 20 years ago. Please answer the question. Rachel's voice was barely audible. Yes, and is it true that you left that infant at St. Mary's Hospital emergency room approximately 4 hours after birth, telling staff you had found him abandoned outside, and then left before anyone could verify your identity? Emma's eyes went wide. She looked at Rachel like she was seeing a stranger. Your Honor, I was 21 years old, Rachel said, her voice shaking. I was terrified and alone, and I made a terrible decision in a moment of crisis. But that was 2 decades ago. I'm a completely different person now. Judge Alvarez continued. The testimony indicates the infant was placed in foster care and subsequently adopted. Did you ever attempt to contact him or reclaim parental rights? Number I, no. Casey Martinez was writing furiously in her notepad, her expression troubled. Judge Alvarez looked at Emma. Ms. Chen, did you know about this? Emma shook her head slowly. She looked at Rachel. You left a baby at a hospital. Emma, please, it was so much more complicated than, you abandoned a baby? Emma's voice was rising. Your own baby. I was young and scared, and I didn't have any support, and I thought I was doing what was best for him. By leaving him in an emergency room and lying about how he got there. It was different then. Rachel was crying now. I didn't have options, I was desperate. Judge Alvarez tapped her gavel. Ms. Chen, I understand this is shocking, but please let me continue. She looked back at Rachel. Ms. Morrison, the testimony also includes financial documentation showing you currently owe $67,000 in credit card debt, your home is 3 months behind on mortgage payments, and you quit your job 6 months ago. Is this accurate? Rachel's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client's financial situation is private and has no bearing on her ability to provide a loving home. It has bearing on motive, Judge Alvarez said. Particularly given that Emma Chen has a trust fund worth approximately $1.2 million that would fall under the legal guardian's control until the child reaches age 21. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Michael's lawyer stood up, looking stunned. Emma's face went from confused to horrified. "Your Honor," Rachel's lawyer said desperately, "my client was unaware of the trust fund when she began." "That's not accurate," Judge Alvarez said, flipping through the file. "Mr. Chen's testimony states that Ms. Morrison specifically discussed financial planning for the trust fund during their initial conversations about the adoption." Rachel's face crumpled. Emma stood up. "I don't want this," Emma said. Her voice was shaking. "I don't want to be adopted by someone who abandoned their own baby and wants my money." "Emma, that's not what this is." Rachel reached toward her. "Don't touch me." Emma backed away. "Michael, I want to go home. I don't want any part of this." Michael stood immediately. "Your Honor, in light of this testimony, I'm withdrawing my support for the adoption. I need time to process this information and discuss it with Emma." Judge Alvarez nodded. "Given the serious concerns raised about Ms. Morrison's history and potential financial motivations, I'm denying the petition for adoption at this time. Ms. Morrison, you have the right to appeal, but I strongly suggest you reconsider whether adoption is appropriate given these circumstances." She banged her gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." Rachel sat frozen for a moment, then she turned to me. I'd been sitting in the back row, trying to be invisible. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom. "You destroyed my life," she said. People were staring. Michael was leading Emma toward the exit. Casey was packing up her files with a troubled expression. I stood. "You tried to adopt my daughter for her money. She's not your daughter. You gave that up 15 years ago, and you gave up your son 20 years ago. So neither of us gets to be a mother, but at least Emma is safe." Rachel's lawyer grabbed her arm as she started toward me. Security guards moved forward. Michael got Emma out of the courtroom before she could see her aunt completely lose control. In the hallway, Rachel was screaming, "You're a monster, a vindictive, jealous monster who can't stand to see me happy. You weren't going to be happy. You were going to drain a teenager's trust fund to cover your debts." She tried to shove past her lawyer toward me. The security guard stepped between us. "I will never forgive you for this," she screamed as they escorted her toward the exit. "Never." I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, let myself shake. My phone started buzzing immediately. My mother, my brother, Rachel's husband. Aunt Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The text from my mother was short. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're satisfied." But there was also a message from an unknown number. "This is Emma. Michael gave me your number. Can we talk?" I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "Whenever you're ready." 3 days later, I drove to Eugene. We met at a coffee shop near the university. Emma was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a hot chocolate, her violin case propped against the wall. She looked up when I walked in. We stared at each other for a moment. "Hi," she said. "Hi." I ordered tea I didn't want and sat down across from her. The silence stretched between us. "Michael told me everything," Emma finally said. "About you being 19 when you had me, about the closed adoption, about the update letters you've been getting. I'm sorry you had to learn about it the way you did. Are you sorry you told the court about Rachel?" I considered lying, decided she deserved honesty. "No, good." Emma stirred her hot chocolate, because she was really pushy. Like overly nice in this fake way. She kept telling me how lucky I was that she was willing to help, that not everyone would want to take on a grieving teenager. My chest tightened. That must have been hard to hear. After my mom died, I felt really alone. Rachel made me feel wanted, but now I know she just wanted the money. She looked up at me. "Michael said you've been getting letters about me twice a year since I was a baby. What did they say?" So I told her. About Sarah's careful handwriting describing Emma's first steps, her first words. About photos of birthday parties and violin recitals. About reading that Emma loved marine biology and wanted to study at Scripps. About thinking of her every birthday and Christmas and random Tuesday in April. Emma listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pulled out her phone. "Want to see pictures from my marine biology camp last summer? We spent 2 hours in that coffee shop." She showed me photos from camp, told me about her marine biology club at school, her dreams of studying cetacean behavior. I told her about my work, my cat, my small life in Seattle that suddenly felt less small. "Do you want to be my mom?" she asked suddenly. The question knocked the air from my lungs. Emma, I signed away that right. I made that choice 15 years ago. But do you want it? More than anything. But wanting something doesn't mean it's right or possible. Emma nodded slowly. "Michael said the closed adoption doesn't mean we can't know each other now. If we both want to, do you want to?" "Yes, very much." "Then let's try that, just knowing each other, and see what happens." My mother didn't speak to me for 8 months. My brother sent one email saying I'd weaponized trauma, that I'd become the villain in Rachel's life. Rachel sent me a letter 3 weeks after the hearing. 5 pages of accusations and pain. She called me jealous, cruel, vindictive. Said I'd destroyed her life out of spite, that I'd always resented her success, her charm, the fact that people liked her. At the end, she wrote, "I hope you're happy. You took everything from me. You've always wanted to be the successful one, the special one. Now you are. Congratulations." I didn't respond, but I drove to Eugene once a month to meet Emma for coffee, then twice a month. She came to Seattle for a weekend, met Fitzgerald, helped me pick out a new bookshelf. Michael remained gracious. Said he appreciated what I'd done, even though the way it happened had been painful. He never tried to replace Sarah in Emma's heart, just focused on being there for her. The trust fund remained safely managed by the court-appointed fiduciary Sarah had originally designated until Emma turned 18. I heard through family gossip that Rachel moved to Arizona 6 months after the hearing. Started over somewhere new where nobody knew about the abandoned baby or the failed adoption. Part of me feels guilty. I used the worst moment of her life against her. I exposed something she'd buried for 2 decades. I destroyed her relationship with our entire family, but Emma is thriving. She got early acceptance to Scripps Institution of Oceanography. She calls me every Sunday, sometimes twice a week. She calls me Natalie. Sometimes, late at night when she's struggling with calculus or worried about something, she calls me Mom. I used my sister's darkest secret to destroy her adoption case. My family calls me a monster. Maybe they're right, but Emma is safe. Emma is loved. Emma has the future she deserves. And I'd do it again. If this one made you think, hit that like button. See you in the next one.